There's something in the air today. What it is, I don't know. This is Heidi Hatch with KUTV 2 News. Do you guys know that noise? Who was that sighing in the corner? Greg Hughes, the prodigal son, returns.
He's back.
Maura Carabello, who is here every week, remains here.
That's right.
Yes, thank you for being a stalwart.
Thank you
Yes.
for noticing.
What's the saying, Pavlov's dog? I heard that theme and I'm just back, baby. I'm back.
You're back?
Well, I'll tell you what. I don't know what you two have done since I've left.
A lot.
Wait, does that mean you're not listening?
I'm offended.
I'm
I am
telling you
too.
that-
You haven't been listening?
No, I've been
because
listening.
I listen to you every afternoon.
You do not. You don't listen to the Rod and Greg show. I'm Citizen Hughes. But
That's not, I have tried to
Utah's
listen.
Talk Radio 105.9 KNRS.
Is there some music we should play?
No, but I've tried to listen, but you know what? I just don't think anyone can handle you, Maura. That's why I have to come back here and have a serious
handle
discussion
Maura.
with you,
So
because you're just a little too much for most people.
You can't listen
and I
unless
can't.
you're on it.
So let's talk about this.
It's just that I just listen to you beat people like a rented mule, and it just doesn't have to be that way.
Okay, I would like to say that we've had some great guests in your
I'll let
absence.
the
None of
speaker know you think that
none of them are Greg Hughes. I will grant that, but I would like to thank all of our amazing guests that
Yes,
have been here.
I don't mean that
Yeah.
too critically, but I think Maura's got an easy ride. That's what
You
I'm
think
trying
so?
to
So
say.
you're here to make sure that someone tightens up the saddle and is ready to go? Okay.
Yeah,
Well, it's a new Greg, because for those of us who are joining us on YouTube,
oh,
you will
where's you
see
two?
right there.
Oh, it's right
Boom.
there.
So he has a
There
pad
it
of
is.
paper now.
I know you've never been a pad of
So-
paper preparation kind of guy.
He's got-
Well, now,
he's got
I don't know if you know, but
preparation.
I'm kind of the talent now.
Yeah, you are.
I have an evening drive home radio.
So tell us your
program.
hours and where you're at, so
You're
people know where to
telling
find
the
you.
top-rated anchor in the state now.
So
But let's listen.
I know. I'm in the this is the
You're
top
yeah.
shelf KUTV. I get this with #1 news anchor.
Yeah.
But the Rod and Greg show is on.
It is good stuff.
It's on. It's an iHeart radio station. There's 5 stations in the building, and I'm on KNRS 105.9 KNRS, and it was the Rod Arquette show for probably 13 or 14 years, and now it's a co-host format where I host with Rod Arquette, and from 4 p.m. till 7 p.m.
I love
And
it.
It's a conservative talk show.
Every day.
As you can imagine.
I'm shocked. I really
Through
thought this
Friday.
would have been more of like a left-leaning kind
Yeah,
of think tank.
Or home and garden.
It's an interesting thing, and why I've missed this program is on that format, our listeners really aren't looking for a meet the press moment or a crossfire from the old days of CNN or the debate back and forth. As I've invited Democrats on, our listeners think they've gotten a full dose of the regime media and the left of center, and so they're not looking for that necessarily in that program. But boy, do I love mixing it up with lefties. So
Well, I'm glad
just
you're
am so
back.
happy to be back.
Yeah, and don't worry if you're like, well, I've had too much Greg. Sometimes Greg takes vacations,
Yeah.
and we'll have Speaker Schultz in here,
So
and some of our other friends that have come in. Rob Axon's been coming in a lot. We've had
You're giving everyone
Representative
a state applause?
Clancy.
You're already apologizing for me? I've been on for 5 minutes.
I know. Okay, so let's just hit the ground running.
Okay.
First off, here today, Sundance officially. I didn't think this was going to happen. They
I
said
didn't
goodbye
either.
to Utah. I thought they'd throw a little bit of a temper tantrum. They would stay, but they're officially going to Boulder, Colorado in 2027. This feels reminiscent of the outdoor retailer show. They're like, we're sticking it to you and we're leaving. Are they going to be back someday, or is this it?
100% they're coming back, and here's why. My godmother and a lot of people that I love, as many know, I'm originally from Colorado. I spent some time in Boulder. My godmother lives in Boulder. Boulder and Sundance are going to hate each other because
Ooh, why?
they all have the same kind of personality. Boulder's not going to put up with Sundance. Sundance isn't going to put up with Boulder. It's a small town. It's a college town. The parking is hard. It's expensive. And when two bougies meet, it's just not a good outcome.
It's
I love
just
Sundance.
Seattle.
I wish Sundance would have stayed. I don't think they are going to be getting what they want out of Boulder. I love Boulder. It's beautiful. It's got lovely hiking.
You were
So-
just there, right? Is that where you were?
It's just, and
Yeah.
so it's a place to visit. Go visit it. I just don't know that I think that Sundance is going to thrive in Boulder.
Okay. Greg, what do you think? Are you like, see you later, Hollywood? Or it's a lot of cash here for the state of Utah. We're going to lose $70 million in wages from losing the Sundance Film Festival. 1,700 jobs will disappear, they say. And then we have all these local businesses, the restaurants and everything that kind of have come to depend on that big cash cow in January.
So I think there's a lot of events that come to Utah, and I think that sometimes we're overbooked, or there's not a lot. That there's more opportunities that would be here if we didn't see that block of time for the festival. It does remind me of the outdoor retailers where they were, and I think where politically it becomes more political is during a session when I was on the clock in the legislature. They said, if you keep dealing with these lands issues, we're gonna leave. And to that, my response was, we'll work on public policy and people we represent, and you do coats and you do hiking and you do your thing. You stay in your lane, we'll stay in ours. This last session, they kind of said the same thing. If you get involved in these public policy issues, we're gonna leave.
And some of those issues were like the flags in classrooms, or what were the issues they were?
Yeah, I think that was it. I think the flags in classrooms. There was something else. It's just nobody accounts to festival organizers. No, as elected officials, you have to account to or you represent your constituents. When you start blurring the lines and it almost feels like an ultimatum at that point.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a good look for lawmakers to change their position on a policy because a festival like the Sundance Film Festival, albeit here forever,
Well, to be clear,
says if you do this, we aren't going to do that. It almost obligates you to say, well, we're definitely doing it.
my answer wasn't about politics, but just to move it to politics.
Oh, it wasn't, but I went there.
So we had a not very well-intended senator say something snarky and parochial about it. But the governor and the speaker and the president all said, we want Sundance here. So I actually don't think, both sides have complained, but I do think that the state, to its credit, said, hey, listen, we want you here. We hear you don't like these things, but we want you here, which is what you're saying. I think our leaders did a great job saying we want you here. One thing I will say, though, to those folks who don't want to program in Utah because of what our legislators do, I think that is a complete opposite of living your values. And so what I've always said is one of the reasons that even though I'm left of center, I'm in Utah is you go where the work needs to be done. And so thinking that you're going to go to Boulder, and this is a film festival. This is not,
they're like the Timu of Utah. They're going to hate it.
But if you're really going to want to make an impact, then go to places that are different than you and make an impact.
Yeah.
So, but I do think it should be clear that the state leaders really showed long-term vision
and
leadership in valuing Sundance.
I think when that was widely reported that if you do this, legislature, then we're going to do that. I think it's showing some at least diplomacy to not fall into that and say, well, then leave. But I will say this: if the snark began, or if the lobbying of challenges began, it began on the Sundance side with the session and the bills that were being considered. But I think just like the outdoor retailers were, after a little while, they were in Denver. They realized it wasn't like Utah, and it didn't have all the advantages that we had as a state, and they're now back. I think you'll see that same cycle happen here. But again, I'm actually really bullish on the film production side, the economy of making films. Hallmark does a lot of filming in Utah. There's a lot of good films.
Main Street in July is always a Christmas movie here in Utah when you're walking around.
I have just recently seen the lineup of films, and these are from Hallmark. There's Christmas movies. There's a lot of good. There's The Chosen having more production days in the state of Utah, which is a very popular series that's streaming. I think there's a huge economy in that, in the production of film. And if there was dollars that the state was spending, and we were, for the Sundance Film Festival, for that to be put into the industry of film production, I think actually has a greater multiplier.
So
and I'd
keep
like
our
to see
connection.
That. Oh yeah, I think there is a connection with film in Utah. Utah's whole state, this state has always had a connection with film. I love the production side more than the self-congratulatory festival side.
Heidi, I don't want to squirrel, but it's his first time back.
Does he have a fancy pen now?
He has a pen. I think it's pewter because it's got some heft. Across the middle it says God Bless America, and then it has a flag and an eagle on its clip.
Very God Bless
That's
America.
Very
I love it.
Republican
Well, the Sundance Film Festival, a lot like Greg Hughes, will be back. I keep singing that song, You'll Be Back, from Hamilton in my head today. Yeah, you'll come back. You'll miss us, so we'll see what happens there.
I'm so happy to be back. I really am.
Well, we've been tracking you. Speaking of being tracked, I don't know if you knew this, but there's a lot of plate readers used in the state of Utah, and They're set up on UDOT property. UDOT is not the one who's tracking you, it's local police departments. That was made available in the 2023 legislative session, I believe. It was used this week for an Amber Alert that I think we all got on our phones. It was hard to miss. 2 children were taken by their biological father after he allegedly killed their mother. Some Good Samaritans saw the truck, they called in. At the same time, police had a fairly good idea of where this guy was because they were tracking them. Online, Greg, people were saying this is too Big Brother. I don't care if we're catching a killer. We shouldn't have these. Is this good policing and something the state needs? It's the tech we need to solve crimes, or is this really getting into our business too much and we don't want the state to be able to track us wherever we're going?
Well, if I understand it right, I think there's an appropriate level of scrutiny where do you still have to have a warrant?
You do need a warrant, yes, and I think there was a bill in this last session that didn't go anywhere that would have changed it where you didn't need a warrant. You would still need permissions, but maybe not a warrant in a quick situation.
I wouldn't support lowering the bar of when to use that, but
Yeah.
I do think it is an absolute effective tool for law enforcement. I wouldn't have said that 10, 15 years ago probably, but in 2025, where the fact that I own a phone and whatever apps I've logged onto this phone, I've actually given them permission to use my camera and my microphone and everything else. Who knows what else I did. Our level of privacy is probably not what it used to be, just with technology and the way it's grown. So I just think it's a different place than the Big Brother world that I was more concerned about or trying to stave off as a policymaker before. But I do like having some of those checks, like a warrant if you're going to use the plate readers. But in an Amber Alert situation, I think that's an appropriate way to do it.
Is this partially because you lobby for law enforcement agencies now and so you see their side more, or do you think it really is the...
So, I am proud that I work with these county elected sheriffs. These are wonderful patriots that we have that are answerable directly to the people. No, you do understand people's circumstances the more you understand them. So I guess there's that. But I've been aware of and I've known about the plate readers. This isn't new technology, and I just think that my tolerance for whether it's the HOV lane and having the thing that knows when you're going and tracks and you pay for the toll every time you go underneath the reader. Some of that has just gotten. I'm more accepting of that scrutiny today in 2025 than I was a number of years ago.
I think they're powerful tools. For me, the screen, and Greg alluded to this, is the closer it is to life and safety, the more comfortable I am. The closer it gets to revenue or Big Brother activities, so it's all about the safeguards. And we're going to grapple with this more and more. Technology keeps advancing. Technology keeps doing more. Where's the line? The line for me is the closer you are to health and safety, Amber Alert, the closer you are to something that is universally held. When governments start using it to profile, when they start using it for revenue purposes, when they start using it to take away the human touch and in fact treat people as chattel, I'm less comfortable with it. So I think we have to accept that it's here to stay and that we're going to start using technology. So I think when we legislate, we shouldn't be resistant to the technology because it's a fact of life.
Yeah.
So what's the screen you use? Well, in my mind, the screen you use is citizen first, human first, a Bill of Rights first. And then once you've safeguarded that, you start to say, okay, cool, what could we use this technology for that would benefit everybody?
And to be fair, I think law enforcement would like to lower that bar, not so they didn't have to go the effort to get a warrant. I think they'd like to be able to point to these life and safety issues and a timeliness and do it sooner than later, but I'm not for that. I think that
You can get a judge pretty quickly, though, for a warrant. It seems like in one of those emergency I can't talk situations. I mean, there's a rare case where it's 2 or 3 in the morning and you're having to wake up a judge and go through that, but that's not all the time.
Now, the readers that they have at the stoplights,
No thanks.
chicken.
And I'm totally
Chicken.
still against the photocop. You're not sending
That's what I mean.
You're not sending me a bill in the mail
Yeah.
that I ran a lane.
I think that is,
You like the personal touch of like your heart thumping, the lights pulling you over, and
where's your kid driving your car and they get the plate, they don't get you.
Well, I can tell you a real life experience of a child who lives in Denver who often apparently doesn't quite make it through the 4 ways. And
and then
we
all of a
have
sudden
received
you're getting a ticket.
you receive those.
Yeah,
with a clear picture of that little driver.
That's the Big Brother I'm still got my eye on. I don't want that.
All right, so we're okay with this. Moving on to President Trump, he has an election executive order this week, and President Trump on Tuesday signed a sweeping executive action to overhaul elections in the United States, including requiring document of proof of citizenship to register to vote in federal elections and demanding that all ballots be received by Election Day. There are questions of whether or not this can actually happen, because a lot of people talk about the strength of our elections, Maura, in being that they're done by local governments and our own communities are doing these elections. Will this executive order matter, and is it something that we're moving towards anyways here in the Utah?
Well, I mean, it's both of those things in Utah. I
Yeah.
mean, so one, it'll go the way of all executive orders that Trump is doing, where he blindly threw something up against the wall, and our little king will need to be judged against the judiciary, who is now holding our Constitution
The 700
sacred.
district judges that want
But
to be
if
president.
Greg Hughes actually gives his answer and doesn't include a passionate plea for federalism and states' rights, I will be so ashamed of him, because elections properly are distributed. Now, he was careful in this executive order to talk about the federal part of it. But the great state of Utah decided that it also wants an election day deadline. So that's a little asked and answered
Yes.
in Utah. But
A legal ID, a government issued ID.
But so a lot of the stuff that he covered, his lemmings here had already covered for him in the prior 45 days of the first of this year. But really, his executive orders are not even worth the paper they're written on. They're so thoughtless. They're so just about his waggling power. That it'll be adjudicated, and
So
I
you
think we'll flush it out.
are, by the way,
states'
contrasting that
rights
to
here,
all
my friend.
the substantive executive orders that Biden do.
I don't have to, Greg,
Okay.
because all I have to talk about is President Trump.
Okay.
So,
Well-
but I will say, states are properly where the balance of election law should be.
So I do believe that these state laws, for federalism purposes, you're right. But some of these, whether it's a state-issued ID to prove that you're a citizen and you are actually eligible to vote,
Which we passed.
having count.
Which
I'm not-
Utah passed.
I'm saying though,
So you
as an
don't need the
executive
federal
order,
government to do that for you.
well, if Utah was every state, that'd be fine. But what we're seeing
But you're
across this
apparently
country,
longing for the
But what
federal
I'm saying-
government to prescribe
well,
this
you're not
to
letting me
you.
finish my point.
I know.
But my point is, much of the things that Utah has done in this most recent HB 300, but also what they've done in the past, is intuitive and would not have been seen as partisan. In fact, a number of years ago, there was a great criticism about the lack of
How progressive you were when you were speaker. on
of
election
transparency or election integrity on absentee ballots in Florida. New York Times was very critical of Florida's absentee ballot process a number of years ago. Why? Because Democrats weren't winning those races.
But
so
did
there was
you
a little
need
bit
an
of a jaundiced
executive
eye.
order for this? Do you
But
think that that's the
what-
proper use of executive power?
So my point is that whether it was a Democrat pointing out election integrity, transparency, chain of custody, then, or if it's Republicans pointing it out now, this was never much of a partisan issue until as of late. So
I hear you saying you
you're
like
saying
the
that
federal instruction.
I love this executive order because it is taking things that used to be common sense and that no one, unless they wanted to cheat, would say, I don't want more transparency, I don't want a strong chain of custody for elections, would have absolutely embraced, and you wouldn't need an executive order for these things. So I think this is a great baseline.
The federal government to tell you what to do.
It's not. He's actually just calling out common sense for those states that don't have it. We happen to have common sense,
It's
so
an
we're
executive
good.
order, Greg.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so we're there. Now, I will tell you that there will be a judge, because there's about 700 of them or so that now want to be president, that never, only for Republican presidents, by the way, that will probably try to hold this up or delay it like they are all of his executive orders. It's amazing that if you had an executive order and you were the victim of a Biden executive order, it took you 5 years to adjudicate that case. You can get it done in 30 seconds in this with the climate we're in right now.
Our current
for,
judiciary is
President
maintaining
Trump.
the presidential line because our president has decided to be.
And it only happens with Trump,
so
huh? Only happens
until
then.
Trump doesn't want
There
to
are
be a
these
king,
beautiful,
we're
beautiful
going to have to
executive orders
keep.
until Trump came
No,
on board.
I wasn't for those. I wasn't in favor. I didn't know you were
just didn't
in
have-
favor of prescription from the federal government. I thought that was something you were against.
Now, well, I think some of these things, like some of these executive
Like
orders, like
prescribing our elections.
we can actually let people go. We can furlough people, like Clinton did. You know, when he
Our
was president.
legislature would disagree.
The,
They think they got it done with
The judiciary
HB
needs to
300.
interrupt that. So, yeah, no, I love the executive orders. I love actually all of them.
I love it all. I
We're
love
seeing
them
a
all.
pace in
It was the
Washington
most
we didn't
beautiful
think would
executive
exist.
order.
Washington, D.C. has never been accused of doing anything quickly, anything effectively. We're seeing a lot of movement with only because Democrats can't get their act
We're
together.
seeing a lot of
the judiciary
starts.
becoming the only roadblock
We have seen
in a way that they've never done before.
No finish lines, but we have seen a bunch of quick starts.
Well, we've seen.
And so now that
what
the
about
race
the border?
is
How's
being
that
run,
border going?
It's
No
going.
new laws,
It's
but
going.
you're at
it's
0%
going at
coming across.
Fewer
Have you
than
seen the year
Obama
over year?
did. He's performing under Obama.
I don't have to worry about Obama. I'm talking
I'm
year
just
over
saying
year.
it's not
When
the
you had
best we've
Biden,
seen. It's
when
not
you've
the
had
best we've
Biden,
seen.
and you have 400,000
Greg, it's not the
encounters,
best
you have
we've seen.
7 now.
It's not
I'd
the
say
best
that's
we've
not
seen.
just a start. I'd say that's actually working pretty well.
I'm saying it's not the best
I'm
we've
just
seen.
saying a simple thank you'd be nice.
I feel
A
like we've
simple
missed out on so much. I'm like thinking in my mind as Greg's speaking about, we've
know.
missed out on,
know.
if you can't remember the last time that Greg was here, I think it was maybe July. So this was when President Biden was still running for president.
Right.
It was before Trump had been attempted to be shot
Say by the lunatics
a
and
couple
more.
times.
When
So
egg prices seemed reasonable.
yes, I mean, like,
Yeah.
so much has
I'm sure they
changed.
are.
I feel like we need to litigate the last, like, 9 months
No,
while you
I-
haven't been
I
here.
had no one
I
to
was
talk
dying
past
to
for
ask
this whole
Maura,
time.
so what was it like to not have any kind of actual primary as you're stating democracy? How did that work for you? Was that great? You got a great bench of Republican Democrats ready to step up because you did away with that whole
For
primary
months,
thing?
I've had to be quiet while other people were talking. Now I can just.
You can just talk whenever you want.
talk.
This was not on our list, but
No.
while you bring this up, it's interesting watching who's trying to fight to get the top of the Democratic pile on the ticket. I personally think it's far too in the future, 4 years from now, to figure out who's going to be running
Yeah.
for president and who's going to have any momentum behind him. But we're seeing this big Bernie Sanders AOC
Isn't that
movement where they're
interesting?
showing up and having these rallies. So it's interesting to see what's happening and who's getting the attention. I mean, Bernie Sanders is probably going to be dead 4 years from now. AOC, I don't know, but it's just interesting to see who it is that's coming to the top.
Dems are looking for a voice to follow.
Yeah.
Republicans are going to be right behind them because they're going to lame duck soon. But
JD Vance he's a pretty good bench guy.
he is for party people. It'll be interesting to see if he is for Americans. I'm not questioning,
Yeah.
he is right now penetrating party, but I mean, that's what Bernie's doing too, to be
But
fair.
Maura, who's
Like,
his equivalent on the left? Because Bernie is kind of aging out there. So who would it be? Crockett? Is
I
that
mean,
that?
I
And
think-
Bernie's
I
so
think
far
we're
to
gonna
the
go
left.
with Tate is my guess, and I don't think they've.
I think your
merged.
best. I think your best Democrat is no, not Gavin.
Yeah,
You're a no for
It's
Newsom?
actually Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania. He is
Yeah.
actually very good, but the party won't have him.
No.
Because he's Jewish, and they don't like that right
it's
now.
because
so.
he's a moderate, and you guys don't like moderates either.
No.
So
Actually,
you're
I
racist.
actually think he is the most credible Democrat that could step forward on the national stage.
He would have been
But
a
I
better
think he
VP
has
pick for Kamala, I think.
He has it,
Probably.
but he wasn't because they have a party problem with.
They
with
don't.
him.
Don't
They
let.
do.
Don't be that guy.
I just think he was
No,
too
they
well
do.
spoken for
I
Kamala.
think
Sometimes you don't want
they're
someone who
protest.
He's
shines
too well
brighter than
spoken
you.
for a lot of people. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not in a deep consumption, and that shows with Trump.
Shapiro?
We want headlines. I mean, I'm saying Shapiro's deep. I'm saying we're looking for superficial right now.
Sometimes superficial's fun.
I'm not on
Is
the
it?
Republic. We're not on the.
Not in
Republicans.
politics.
We have our own party.
You guys have huge depth.
We're all
I
about
mean,
depth.
you guys are,
We are,
super
absolutely.
deep thinkers.
We are.
We don't group text well, but we're group thinkers.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to
Yeah.
that group texting. Should we just discuss it right now?
Sure,
It's
let's
on our
do that.
list. So, I have never used any apps outside of just my messaging on my iPhone to text, but apparently, in the federal government, in past administrations and current administrations, we're learning that, there's some group texts going on, that are planning for war actions. And I'm trying to find the exact, what is that stupid app's name? Where's my notes
Signal.
here? Signal is the app. So my big question on this, we've all heard about it at this point, is the Trump administration accidentally texted its war plans to the Atlantic editor. He's the editor there. My big question was this an accident? How does that happen? I know I've accidentally texted people the wrong person. Ariel Mueller, that works for Senator Mitt Romney, had a name very similar to someone else I worked with, and so I accidentally texted her on occasion. But it wasn't like in super sensitive, I don't know. I don't even know how to say this, but I feel like someone had to have added him on the list on purpose. How do you accidentally add on a journalist to a group chat you have with people who are in the intelligence business? Maura, was this an accident or was this just stupid? What was this?
It was unacceptable from that level of leadership is what it was. There are different expectations and conditions depending on who you are, and this was unacceptable. And this just shows the lack of experience and the lack of care and the lack of understanding of propriety. So either way, it's unacceptable. Probably what was more unacceptable than the original mistake was the lying and the covering up by equal cabinet members.
There's no line.
the lack
Not
of
at all.
character that is being displayed. The true test is whether you take responsibility. Nobody is taking responsibility. It's just excuse after excuse. And this was just, and then the man who did it, his excuse was, yeah, there was a mix-up in my phone where I thought I was sending it to this person and that phone number had
I
changed.
feel like that's the kind of list
But
you would
you're-
check and double check and triple check.
because of what you're sending. So I think that this is just unacceptable level of failure from a cabinet level position.
It's not lying. They said it was a big mistake. They're not saying it was a
Not in
nothing
front of
burger. They're saying
Congress,
it's a
they didn't
mistake.
say that. Two members of the cabinet
It was
said
not war plans. And
that
it wasn't action plans. These were
they
things that
minimized it, Greg.
they are going to be communicating this. Well, let me just say this, okay?
Should they be using Signal in the first place? Because
Well,
it's not
it's-
getting documented in the
As the
history
CIA
books.
director Ratliff said, it was when he got into that position, he was told it was an acceptable conduit of communication for the Biden administration and for the
Not
CIA.
according to a memo from a month earlier.
So here's the deal. It is at best or at worst, it's a mistake and it shouldn't be made. It might be someone trying to undermine what they're doing and in bringing on a journalist and trying to embarrass that administration. It might be dumb, doing something dumb, or it could be something even worse than that. But for the Democrats to say that this is the pearl clutching moment that we have to fire everybody in sight and everyone is this whole thing, the whole sky is falling. I woke up this morning and thought, did we have a Chinese surveillance balloon fly across this entire country and not be shot down, whether it was in Canada, whether it was across
Greg, he
until it
put
got to the East
American
Coast, and
military
then they
members-
shot it down?
He put a military
The
member in danger.
selective outrage on the left right now about how terrifying and horrible this is when it was an effective mission and it worked. When we've had a Chinese
So you don't think it
surveillance
risks
balloon
American lives?
fly across this country with no job that I know of that was lost, or people falling off a plane in an Afghanistan withdrawal, falling off as they were taking off with no one fired. I find the selective outrage on this
So
to be on purpose
you
because
don't
they don't
think
want to talk
those
about
two
these
things should have
successful
included
things.
people firing? You don't think the balloon should have included firing?
No, I do.
And
I
you
think
don't
those are far worse than this.
Okay, so
this
if
text
that
you're
is your
talking about.
standard,
Yeah, I don't.
you
think
don't
that-
want to apply it
I
to
don't.
this.
Yeah, I don't think the text
You're
thread
saying
matches the
because
surveillance balloon across the country.
Biden didn't apply it, you don't want to apply it.
I'm not. I'm saying they're not even equal in circumstance remotely.
So then why are you referencing them then if
Because
they don't
you're
have
ma-
any, if they
because-
don't have any continuity?
Because you want them
between
fired for something that's so much less than something that was so
You're
severe.
the one who brought those comparisons.
I am. I'm
so
saying
you're saying
these
two
are
things
severe.
that don't compare to each other. We should compare. You either want them
I'm saying-
compared or you don't.
I want them compared in their.
Okay, then
in their
if they're
rates.
equivalent,
No, I'm not saying they're
if they're
equivalent. I'm saying they're
equivalents-
not equivalent, and you didn't have a word to say about the balloon or fire anyone. You didn't have anything to say about the
I
Afghanistan
didn't.
withdrawal.
I didn't.
No, you, the royal,
Oh, them?
the party,
Those
the
those
administration.
people? But
There
I'm
was
not
no
those
accountability
people.
on the
I'm
most
not those
severe
people.
of failures, let alone a chat
cabinet
that had
member-
had a member of media
a
on it
cabinet member
on a successful
put
mission. It's not
American
even close,
lives
and yet
at
the
risk.
reaction is so severe over here, and
I have
crickets
missed
over
you
there.
two
The
in the
guy
same row.
Crickets over here,
responsible
and
for this,
the world, the sky
screwed
is
it up,
falling over
is
here.
not even able enough to put together a cogent group text, and you want him
You wanna know why?
to be responsible
You wanna know why this
for
text thread is such a big
recommending
deal?
a defensive
Because the
position.
ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine doesn't want to be talked about by Democrats because it's a bit of progress. Taking
I'm
7
sorry, how's
million
that
people
going?
off of the
Did I miss the signing?
So 7 million people
You're
that are age
projecting
120 years or
someday
older
this may
off
happen.
of Social Security so that we can make Social Security stronger and getting those
Greg,
needs off and getting more
I
efficient.
know you have to blur
Something
the
that
lines to
Democrats
win your
don't want
argument.
to talk about.
I know that you have
No,
to bait
I'm
and
saying
switch. I know
it's not
you
a bait and
can't
switch.
stay on the
The
subject
bait and
because you'll
switch
lose
is-
the subject
the
if
bait
you
and
don't
switch
stay
is
on
you
it.
want to talk about a text thread as if this is all that matters. This is the biggest thing in the world. Well, all these other good things
So
are finally happening to this
communications
country.
don't matter to you.
Not to the
So,
degree that you're making
let's
it.
take
not
big
at all.
picture
No
on
one
this
What
should
should
issue.
happen? What should happen?
I think
We
there
should
be
agree to
government-
not to be
whoever
old men
put
who
that-
don't know how to
whoever
do
put
this?
Goldberg on that text thread. There should be consequences to that individual.
We
Should
know who
Hegseth-
it was.
Should Hegseth
We know
have to
who that
resign?
was. So what should happen to him?
I think-
You don't
I
seem to think this is a thing.
No, I don't. I think it is what you want it to be because you don't have a lot
So
of
you don't
answers
think
on
you
anything
don't think
productive
it
going
matters.
on in this
Let's
country.
stay
There's
on
a lot
the
of good
subject
things
for a
happening.
second. I
Yes,
know
let's.
you do better
Yes.
when you don't focus on the argument because then
What
you
you
can
don't like
win by
about the
bait and
argument is
switch.
you want to focus on, you want to
What
strain at gnats
happened?
while you're swallowing camels. You
I
know what
want-
straining at
I
gnats
just
and
wanna
swallowing
talk about the
camels
topic at
is?
hand.
The text
I-
thread and having him on,
So
there
you
was
think it
no,
was nothing?
it was not a war plan.
You don't
think it's a
think-
war plan?
Oh, so
You
that's
think
your
it's the war
standard.
plan.
That's your standard.
I don't think it should have been
If it was a war
honored.
plan, what should have happened?
I'm not saying that that's
So
what I'm
time
saying.
and
in
place of
standard
a
is
bombing isn't enough.
You
for
saying that someone on that text thread
I
is
just think
so
that there are a
bad
bunch of excuses
that the
for
Secretary
poor
of Defense
performance.
should have to be fired.
I didn't say any of
We had a
that.
Secretary
I'm
of
just
Defense,
saying-
Lloyd Austin, who was unconscious in a surgery without
Yes,
anyone
and
taking
what did I
his
say
place.
about that? What did I say about that?
You loved it. You were happy. You were so happy they didn't do it. I don't know what you said.
He
But
should have been let go.
Okay, well.
Because that was not up to the standard of the Secretary
Well,
of
you would
Defense.
be by yourself
This is
in
also
that,
not, no, I
because
wouldn't be.
I didn't hear any of the
I know
Democrats
you do
saying what you
selective
just said.
listening.
I
You
think
don't
that's
talk to
something you
Democrats,
come to
Greg.
after the fact.
Like you just got done telling us you never talk to the other side.
I'm going to need
I
the
talk
mute
to
button
welcome
for you
back.
too.
I talk
So
more.
let's dial this back to the question of whether you should be using this kind of
No.
app. Because
No.
the Signal app or whatever. Here's another question. I've heard rumors that here in Utah, even on the legislative level, when there's conversations that they don't want to have on the record and they don't want to have something so it can be grandma'd, which is a request to see those documents, that sometimes those conversations are going on and negotiations on something like WhatsApp or the Signal app or something like that. Should those conversations be allowed to be going on there, or should they all be on the public record, whether it's local or national government?
I don't think everything should be on the public record. I know that's a complex statement, but when you're negotiating things, when you need things to be real, it can't be done in public. What's the difference between that and transparency is the ethical question. But this notion that hearing and seeing everything is what's transparent, I categorically disagree
So
with
do you
that.
think that on the
But
federal government
I
level
think
they should be able to do
using
it?
Group settings,
Yeah.
group chats is not needed. I think that lacks judgment. I think if you don't understand the relationship between the communication channel and the sensitivity of what you're talking about, you don't have the wherewithal to be in
Yeah,
that
I
position.
think there was information being shared with what they thought were the critical people that would have to explain this to heads of state or other people about what was happening and helping inform them. Here's what I love about that text thread that certainly the left is, I'm not going to say you personally, but the left is not talking about. Typically, if you come across a text thread, people that have made a lot of public statements, you might find in that text thread things that are contradictions, things that they might say privately that they didn't say publicly. What you find in that text thread is verbatim what they've been saying publicly. You're seeing expressed privately inside of that text thread, which I find to be refreshing. I like to see that they're saying, you mean that the Europeans' navies, combined navies, can do nothing to stop the Houthis and attacking these, and they can't. They can't do anything about it. It takes the United States to get in there and do something about it. There is a frustration about Europe that's expressed in that text thread. None of that is secret. Those are things that all that's in the public domain. All of those expressions have been said publicly. What I found interesting about that was, one, how worthless Europe is at protecting themselves. But the second one being, it's very, very consistent. There was nothing in those text threads that were different or would contradict what has been said on the public record, which I find to be refreshing. Again, this is a very transparent administration, and I think
They
if you
wouldn't
took
have
any of
released
our
those if the journalist wasn't on there. There was no request. That's
What
not
do you
subject to FOIA. Don't act like they said, hey, let us know. What happened is
I
a
don't-
journalist
I don't
released
think
them.
you're
The
following my
government
point.
didn't.
I'm saying that
You're saying they have public and private conversations that equal each other, and wasn't that refreshing? Yes, I heard
they
that.
didn't know that was
but
going to be released by Goldberg,
But
so they're
here's the
talking
thing,
privately,
Greg.
and it matches what they say
If
publicly.
you
I
really
think that's
care
actually
about
good,
your
because I don't think
content,
a lot of
so
people
let's
do
just
that.
talk about as a communications tool. If you're relaying something that is nuanced,
Okay.
that is heavy, that is really, really consequential, I will tell you the least effective tool is texting. No matter whether you're using a group text or whatever you're using. If you're saying, and I mean, I do this for a living.
I know
when
you
I
want to go
need
back
you
to
to
the actual
understand,
text thread. I'm
you've got
talking
to
about
call.
the substance of it.
I know,
I'm talking
I'm not.
that it's not war
I'm just
plans.
saying,
I'm talking that it's selective
if
outrage.
it's serious,
I'm
you
talking
don't
about,
send a group text.
You're not going to.
I'm talking about the
I
channel
don't
of
argue.
communication.
I don't think you should have a journalist on a text thread like that.
I'm not talking about the
getting
journal.
no argument from me.
I'm talking about Heidi's question was about should we be using these, and the two contexts for it were is it subject and also is it effective. So one, it's arguably not subject depending on, and two, I just think if it's honestly a serious topic, this is now a universal
I think
comment about how we communicate with each other.
Yeah.
We're missing a ton.
If I
have a serious conversation I need to have with Heidi, I'm not going to text it.
You're gonna call
so
me?
much I'm going to call.
So if the phone rings, I don't. Oh,
Yeah, don't answer.
put your serious pants on. Maura's got to talk real talk.
Here's what I'd say to that. I don't think that they had some some equivalent of a text messaging app that was internal to the United States military, government, State Department, whatever, and they opted to use the less secure one versus the more secure one. I think it's actually speaks sadly of our country, of all the money we spend, and the $2 trillion a year of spending more than we bring in, and the $36 trillion in debt that we don't have, because I don't think we do something equivalent to Signal where they can speak in real time and share that information. So I don't think they picked a bad one over a good one. I don't think that good one exists, and I think that speaks poorly of this country or its.
Oh my gosh, let's old school it for a minute. Why don't you jump on Teams? Why don't you have a group call? Like, there were so many ways for them to real-time communicate and not include the editor of the Atlantic.
I know. I think, though, that as long as this is taken in the podcast is what Democrats really need, because you don't want to talk about the other issues of good things that are going on. This is the one you want to focus on. And I'm not saying that was a great thing. I'm just saying
Greg,
in the
I
grand
have missed your skill set, but it doesn't mean your BS isn't as high as it's ever been.
Well, you can call the Ukraine and Russia conflict, BS. You can call it. I'm saying there's a lot of important things happening in real time.
But I don't think you're substantive
Your
right
text
now.
thread is just not up there with
All
the
right,
things
I'm
that
bringing
are
it
going
back
on.
to Utah and the legislature.
Suck
The
it back
session
up.
is done.
We're back to what we're 2:32.
I know we're on a tight I cannot talk
Tight
at a tight time frame today because Greg has an actual full-time job he has to go to now. But I want to talk about the vetoes that are coming out. Yesterday, there were another 100 bills signed. One of them was the elections bill that a lot of people are waiting to see if the governor would sign. He did. There have also been 2 vetoes so far. There may be others. We still have today and tomorrow, I think, if he wants to. Wait, no, today's the 27th, so today's the last day.
Yeah,
so we'll have to watch our emails. He vetoed the Senate Bill 37, which protected education funds from being moved to the general fund, and also a veto that would have required the Chief Justice of the Utah Supreme Court to be appointed by the governor. It was one of several bills that targeted the judiciary this session. So the governor, by signing that veto, gave up his right to, pick the king of the judges here in Utah, which was probably a smart move.
Yeah, I mean, what was interesting is 2 things were interesting in his comments. One, he attributed motive that many of us attributed, which was nefarious. So he sort of concurred that he felt like this was meddling, not necessarily best policy. The other thing that was interesting and really smart, I thought, on his part, was not actually the clause that allowed him to appoint one. It was the clause that allowed the bodies
every
to be
4 years,
considered
yeah.
every 4 years. And that's what was giving him more heartburn. He did say, hey, I'll give up this, but I think the poison pill for him, as he described it, was the legislative bodies having more control over who was in the judiciary. And I thought that was really long-term and good thinking. And he did very similar thinking on his education bill, in which he more spoke to unintended consequences and more spoke to the imprecise, how I read it was the imprecise drafting. It was sort of like he felt like there were some flaws perhaps in it. He wasn't trying to be, I don't think, holistically conceptually for or against it, but he felt like there was some drafting.
So were these healthy vetoes to you, or was he clinging to the power of Grayskull and doesn't want the legislature to have more power?
No, look, I think that the rationale that Maura shared is, I think it's good. And I think that every governor should be finding bills where they can flex that veto power. If you don't ever, then you lose that muscle memory, or when you do get to a bill you want to veto, it looks like the sky's falling because you're not doing it on a regular basis. So I think that governors, if they're smart, they're looking at bills where they're not tracking what was passed, they don't feel good about it, they're going to veto some things. I understand why he's doing that. I will say that while the issue about the judiciary might not have been the solution, I do think that we continue to see issues about our judiciary, even the crimes against children that are surfacing in Cache County. I find retention elections to be, they are a zero information election cycle. There is nothing we know about judges when we're asked to retain all of this list of judges.
We do have that panel that they put online, but
which are made up of attorneys who they have to go and appear in front of those judges at some point. When you ask a judge, when you ask an attorney to tell you what frustrations they have so that you might actually get some information, the attorneys have told me they could be disbarred for disparaging a judge, and I'm not going to share.
Have you read those?
They've done.
They're anonymous. They also include secret shoppers.
Yeah,
I
don't think it's well
dozens
enough. No.
Of those
I
files.
think
You and I agree on
I think
this.
that's like a water district in some senior center, off the beaten path, not an election that everybody else is going to type of election where there's not enough broadly understood information or context about the people you're being asked to retain as judges. And I would love that process to be much more transparent than it is. And I think if you got there, a lot of these other bills are talking about on how to hold a judiciary accountable. You don't need those if you could have a retention election that had something better than what we currently have.
So Greg outlined the problem very well. And by outlining the problem so well, he's pointed out how flawed the legislative solution was. The problem is,
I wasn't being that critical. I was
low
just saying, I don't think
information.
that's there's a better way.
No, I'm just using you to frame out the way I want things. So by having, we have a problem with, we all have a problem with, how do I know this judge? That's the problem. The offered solution from the legislature is, well, just trust us, we'll do it instead of you. That is horribly flawed logic. So the problem is we don't have enough information.
Yes.
So what do you say? You pull up your bootstraps to the 104 of you and get about the business of showing us better education. So don't take away our right to vote for judges, which is where they're headed. They go immediately to power grabs when what we're saying is, I think we all agree we would like more information about them. That is actually something the legislature could help us with. So instead of doing a power grab, I suggest that the legislature come up with legislation on how to educate us better so that we feel more informed about our vote on the judiciary.
Education matters for sure, and while we're talking about the judiciary, just really quickly, we're not going to go through all the different cases, but there are accusations from the right now that there's lawfare going on with district court judges stopping all the executive orders, and then a lot of people will say, hey, this is the balance of powers, this is how our country should be working. Utah Senator Mike Lee's introducing a bill that would create a 3-judge panel to review any presidential executive actions in court. He believes this would be maybe a more fair way when you have executive orders, so one rogue judge doesn't stop something. You have 3 judges that would do it, and then if there were a question, there would be an automatic appeal to the Supreme Court. Greg, is this the right way to do it, or do we just leave the process as is because it's working well?
It's not working well. It is really stopping the executive branch from doing its duty, its function. These are functions that other presidents of both parties have done before. The left doesn't like the answers, and they're court shopping. They're not taking this to a Texas judge with the deportation issue. They're going to one in D.C. They're shopping for the judges they want. These judges are acting in the capacity of the executive branch. There's only one, or arguably 2 people that are elected by the people in the executive branch. That's your president, vice president. Everybody else is unelected, or appointed. Well, they have a job. And the job that's being done right now is the job the executive branch has the right to do. The American people voted for them. This ticket. If the left doesn't like it, go get your Democrats and go pass a bill that says otherwise. But to use the judges the way they have, we've not seen that done this way before. I do think that if we're going to break precedent, we're going to see a cavalier approach by judges. Then you're going to have to do something to improve that process.
We haven't seen such activist executive branches in our history. And so I think you see a judiciary that is forced to hold the line so that we maintain what has been our standard distribution of power. So we just haven't seen an executive who's trying to overstep their boundaries as much. So usually, the argument that the right is using pretty effectively is activist judges, because we've heard that for years. Well, actually, they're kind of staying place. They're in status quo, and you're seeing a really activist executive branch. Mike Lee has made a career out of trying to suck up to President Trump. I'm not sure how effective it is being for him, but this is just a foray into that.
So you don't see this making any sense?
I mean, it makes he is a scholar in this area, but this is a political play. This is not a scholarly play.
Well, they're not going to get 60 votes for it, so I don't think the bill's going to pass.
It's academic,
but let me just say this.
The 3-judge panels do exist already, and they're part of the process. It would just move it up closer.
I truly do wish. I think it's a thoughtful piece of legislation. I wish there were 60 senators that would vote for it, but I don't think that's the case. But I would just say this. If you were going to drain a swamp, if you have a federal government that's $36 trillion in debt, which is I don't know anyone that thinks this is a sustainable path that we're on. $2 trillion, $1 trillion of that, by the way, just paying interest, which is more than our national defense budget, you name it. It is so reckless that if you were to change that status quo of how we got here and how that trajectory of spending is going on, I would imagine the weeping and wailing and the federal employees that don't want to lose their jobs and the programs that don't want to be cut. These judges are protecting the status quo, but to what end? I don't think this country continues on this trajectory, and I don't know what it would sound like or look like to change Washington, other than the way that President Trump is trying to do this, than by the actions he's taking.
The change in
there has to
Washington,
be a
Greg,
change,
has to come from
and it's not
Congress.
going to be this glacial pace that you do over 10 years. We're on a very scary track. If people want certain things, these are nice
You're
to have.
in the majority in the Senate
keep this kind
and
of,
the House.
debt
Why are you
and
not
deficit
demanding
spending.
change from that? Why are you not
They're not-
demanding
there's not
accountability
one or
from the
the other.
Republic?
We
You're not
want
demanding
both.
anything of Congress.
Oh, no,
you
I
have
am.
zero requests from
Let me
Congress.
tell you something.
You have zero. In
Oh,
fact, you're
yes, I do.
blaming Congress on the Democrats, which is rich. So why don't you have
You
demands?
can tell me what you think,
If
but you
you
can't tell
want
me what I think.
Washington, D.C.
Let me just tell you.
to change, then you have to change Congress.
Okay.
And I don't hear you talking
I
about
am.
that at all.
Okay,
You want to know who's
well, then
responsible for
let
the
me
spending?
tell you.
It's Congress.
Let me tell you how
want to know
Congress
who
needs
can't
to do
pass
this.
a budget right now? Congress.
Trump can do every single executive order he's done, and then
Talk
you know what?
about
Then you know what
Congress.
Congress needs to do? If they just heard from the NPR CEO, Ms. Mayor, and all of her answers were horrendous. They were
You
bad.
are in
If
control
they
right
don't-
now.
If I don't
Stop
see,
whining
don't-
about the
Maura,
minority.
please stop interrupting me. Let me say this. If everything we heard in that hearing yesterday about the role of NPR, what they've said in the past versus what they're representing, they're saying right now, 87 editorial members on their staff, not all of them are registered Democrat. That doesn't feel like national, doesn't feel even-handed. 87-0 editorial staff members for NPR. If they don't cut, if Congress, not the president, if Congress doesn't put in that next budget a zeroed out line item, it's $36 trillion in debt and $2 trillion in deficit spending. If you don't get rid of that, if Congress doesn't, then it's performative politics and pageantry to even have that.
is causing the deficit.
I'm saying that's
Like,
a
this is-
$535 billion between TV and radio that you don't have to spend, and
So-
you are going to have to get to a $2 trillion somewhere.
Is this your
Maura,
good way
somewhere.
of not addressing the fact that we have to talk about Medicaid
We
and
don't
Social
need
Security?
public. No, you don't want to talk about that. You find 7 million people at the age of 120 or older getting benefits.
You're in charge.
Pare it back.
You're in charge.
Well, they should. And
You're the majority.
but
So why don't you speak for
I
the
hear
majority?
a lot of people
you
saying
can pass whatever
that
you want
when
right now.
Doge finds 7 million people, actually there's more than that, there's 13 million people, but they've taken 7 million and now are able to identify them as deceased. But there were 13 million people at 120 years
You're
of age
doing
or
bait and
older
switch
that were
again.
getting, it's not,
Because
they're
you
getting
can't follow
benefits. If
through.
you want to protect people's,
This is Trump
if
logic.
you want to protect, if you
have
want
to
to cut
bait and
Social
switch
Security,
because the ideas are so bad.
if you'd let me finish my point, you would find that I have not switched any bait whatsoever. If you
went-
want to keep people,
You went from the deficit to
yes, let me cut.
NPR to
Because
Doge
it's Congress's, I'm
to
giving
dead
you the
people, and
examples.
you're telling me
Yes,
that this
I'm
is
giving you the-
cogent?
I'm giving you the examples of what Congress has to cut, so that you know there's a role for Congress. If you identify 13 million people at 120 years of age or older who are receiving benefits, if you want to make Social Security stronger and you want to cut areas, you don't want to cut people's current benefits, then you don't give it to 13 million people
And
that aren't alive.
I
So
found this
that's
in the
where Congress-
Republican bill
This is
to
where Congress
continue
has to do it. I
the
expect to
budget.
see Congress making budgets based
The
on these types of
Republican House and Senate
findings.
proffered a continuing resolution. These cuts were found in that? Because I didn't find them in there.
The man's been on the job for 60 days.
I'm not
so
talking about
we're
the
gonna see
president.
it
I'm
going
talking about
forward.
Congress.
I want Congress to do more too, but I'm telling you that I'm giving you the examples. That in this budget that's supposed to be this big
We
budget
have
coming in
9
April,
months of problems we need to
We
solve,
have-
and we only had 45 minutes today,
Oh
and
my
we're
God.
so
But
out of
I wanna-
time.
There's an asterisk here. I do not interrupt you as much as you interrupt me. This is a newfound skill set of yours since I've been gone. I don't
Maybe
think
it's
you do
because
this
you
with the
just
other
really
people.
missed
You just
fighting
missed
with you.
Oh My goodness.
I don't point my finger at
everything,
you.
yeah, everything. I didn't point my finger at you.
So much tension in the air.
Now listen, that Congress, I just want to hit home my
have to
point.
go.
I have to hit home my point. You
Okay,
said I'm
you
not
have the
including
last
Congress
word.
in the
Last
executive orders and the actions of this president. I'm not including Congress. I'm saying if the inefficiencies and the waste and the fraud and the abuse are not reflected in the budgets that should be signed by Congress, then the Republicans are as guilty as Democrats of doing nothing. I expect to see
Absolutely. I hope they pull it
serious
together.
cuts in these budgets based on the work that's being done in the executive
It's
branch.
nice to have you back, Greg.
It is nice to have you back.
It's nice to be back.
We had so many things on our list that we didn't get to this week, so you can look forward to next week. I want to talk about some poll numbers that came out. The title was Elephant in the Room, and it was looking at Utah's GOP through the looking glass of more centrist or MAGA and how they were supporting our senators, the governor. And that brings us to looking forward to May, when we have Rob Axon and Phil Lyman squaring off to be the head and leader of the Utah GOP
Are you a
here in the
delegate?
party. So You're not. Interesting. So we've got a lot to talk about.
I'm not either.
And there's a lot to focus on of where Republicans are headed. So we're going to talk about that. Our condolences also to the Love family. Mia Love passed this week after her 3-year battle with cancer. She'll be lying in state April 6th. So we can talk a little bit about some of our happy memories in the week or two to come as they go through some of those ceremonies that the state is invited to. So really glad that you're back, Greg. I like that moment where you and Maura agreed for about 2 seconds. That was nice.
Oh, that's so nice.
It was good.
I feel like there's some built-up tension that's come over the last few
There's no
months.
tension,
totally
actually. We can
I
battle
feel
like
like
this, but
he's just
we're totally
raging right now.
Ugh.
Just the anger.
There's no anger.
I feel like I just had a good workout.
I'm just not able to finish a point.
I mean,
I'm fighting for my life over here.
So angry.
I'm just trying to get to the end of my point. You keep roadblocking me.
I don't know, maybe yoga?
Because you don't like my point.
Yoga.
I don't know.
All right, we're going to prescribe some downward dog for everyone who listened to this podcast. Go stretch it out, get some sunshine because the snow's coming back, and we will be back again next week. Greg, you'll be back next week?
Absolutely.
It's going to be good.
Yeah, someone has to keep her in
Someone
mind.
has to. Somebody's
Jeez.
got to do it.